This is Innovation Currency. My name is Leigh-Ann Buchanan, and I am your host. What I want this podcast to help people see about themselves is that innovation is for everyone, and everyone is an innovator. I developed the Innovation Currency framework using years of research and practical observation to offer insights that answer two very important questions. First, am I an innovator? And if so, what type of innovator am I? When it comes to the first question, we already know. Everybody is an innovator. You just have to find out what type you are. You might wonder why I call this framework Innovation Currency. It actually all started with kind of an ancient parable, one that I heard in church for the first time. And in this parable, a wealthy, successful leader has to go away on a trip for an undetermined amount of time. And he calls three of his very trusted servants and gives them each a certain amount of talents. Now, in this case, a talent is the antiquated term for the monetary unit that's worth about 20 years worth of labor. It's actually a lot of money. In many translations, a talent is described as gold, which is a way of really underscoring how valuable it is. Now, when this leader distributed his wealth among his three trusted employees, to the first employee, he gave 5 talents. And to the second employee, he gave 2 talents. And to the third employee, he gave 1 talent. Now, while the leader was away, off doing whatever he was doing, the first and second employees, they got to work. They doubled the amount they originally received through a combination of business strategies, some that included trading, some that included, maybe some old school investments, whatever made sense at the time. But the third employee, he opted for a different approach. He simply buried the talents in the ground. Needless to say, upon the leader's return, the first 2 employees were celebrated because they had created a significant return on investment. And the third employee, he was actually punished and shamed. Traditionally, the takeaway from this story is that we should all strive to be like the first 2 employees and maximize whatever wisdom and opportunity that we have. We're encouraged to apply this concept to our finances and the opportunities that come our way. When I thought about this story, something stood out for me. I wondered about the third employee. What made him feel the need to hide something of such great value? Was he afraid that he would lose the money? Was he afraid that he would squander the money? Did he not believe that he was the type of person that deserved to have such wealth? Did he not feel like he had the skills or the connections to make even more money? Why did he allow these external circumstances to distort the opportunity that lay in front of him? For some reason, he was unable to embrace something of value and wealth that was sitting right there in his hands. Instead, he chose to hide it, to bury it, and never let it see the light of day. When we think about our individual potential to innovate, it's an incredibly valuable resource. It's actually kind of like a form of currency, a rare form of currency, much like the talents of gold that are described in the parable. Yet all too often, many of us, just like the third employee, we allow our innate power to innovate to remain hidden from the world. We may do so, I know this from personal experience, for a variety of reasons. Maybe we are scared, maybe we're even unconscious that we're hiding it, but the result is that few people, particularly people from diverse experiences, backgrounds and identities, ever see themselves as innovators. So the Innovation Currency framework is designed to help everyday people like you and like me harness the power of our identity as innovators. And when we do that, what we can do is build a more equitable society more just institutions, new sets of social norms, and more accessible pathways to opportunity. The truth is, the world needs more innovators. The problem is that we, as a society, as individuals, have yet to unlock the full potential of the power of innovation. Now, my background is Jamaican, and I grew up listening to Bob Marley. In fact, when I was younger, my mom had this Bob Marley cassette tape. Many of you probably don't even know what a cassette tape is, but it was this white color with blue writing, and we would listen to it over and over and over again in the car. And one of my favorite songs is Bob Marley's Redemption Song. And in that song, Bob Marley issued a really grand challenge. He said, "Emancipate yourself from mental slavery." I've always believed that innovation is exactly what liberates us. Innovation is what gives us the power to free ourselves from even the tightest grip of the status quo. Now, the true currency of innovation is freedom. The freedom to see the world not as it is, but as it could be. And so, my question for you is, what will you do with your innovation currency?
I guess to close this out, my last question is, why does the world need innovators? I'll start with you, Marte, and we'll end with you. Why does the world need innovators?
Because there's endless solutions that we're not going to get to unless we have those collisions. And we need all the solutions we can get. We have a lot of gnarly problems. A lot of them are built into the structure and, bias and just we could unpack that for a long time, but we need innovators because we constantly need, the world is changing. We are changing. Look at how much innovation has happened in response to the pandemic. All of a sudden, we're used to another way. We are now having Zoom dinners with our families distantly. I didn't realize that I could have a Zoom dinner with my family. Now it's something we do every week. So we need innovators to help us be close as we get in. I think the world gets even more technologically advanced. And we need innovators because they make our lives better. What they create when we give them space, opportunity, and resources and networks, they make us better. And there's a lot of stuff out there that people create that we don't even know we need that can help us socially, intellectually, physically, etc. In all of those ways, innovators, look, we're surrounded by lights. Light bulb was a thing. That was an innovation. And now we just don't even think about it. Mm-hmm. We're carrying powerful technology around with us in our pockets. Supercomputers that used to take up huge buildings. So we need it because as we grow as human beings, I hope it's also a place for us to develop greater empathy and solutions that really make things better for everybody.
Chad, why do we need innovators?
We need innovators because without discomfort, there's no growth. And innovation challenges the system that's in place. And so with the rate that things evolve and the brilliance of people in the world that continue to come up with new things that make us uncomfortable, that challenge us, technology is the easiest and greatest example of it. But that forces things to change, and then people need to catch up. And when we think about the big systemic structures and how kind of bureaucratic and slow moving they can be, they can't adapt. And so people need to be innovative to figure out how to manage where we're going and where we are. There's really is there a world without innovation? Innovation kind of is forced upon us. It's not necessarily something we choose.
I think that an innovator is actually a lot more common than what we tend to think about. So with the folks that I work with, some really incredible social impact leaders who are queer and trans people of color, what we have come to find is that innovation happens every day as almost necessity. Because when we think about the systems and structures that were created with us not in mind, in order to thrive, in order to survive even, in order to build some sense of resilience, you have to be innovative. we often think of an innovator as a white man behaving badly. That's what I often think of and is celebrated. And really what we think about is that there are people who may never even think of themselves as innovators, who are doing things that are disruptive, that are creative, that add value, that are a different take on every aspect of their life on a daily basis, just so that they can make space to exist in the world.
I love it. Dejha, how do you define an innovator?
I mean, I start with thinking about imagination as a radical act of freedom. And for me, the freedom to imagine is the freedom to innovate. It's the freedom to be able to see tomorrow, to see what you don't have today in a different space, in a different context. And so I would agree with Corey in that it's in all of us. But the question is, do we have the courage and the conditions and the support system to be able to see ourselves first as innovators and then go out and do the innovating?
I feel like there's a mic drop. So Dejha, are you an innovator?
I am.
And then since you do identify, because not everybody has gotten there yet, I can tell you personally, like I struggle with calling myself an innovator. Yet maybe externally people might say, oh yeah, no, for real, Leigh-Ann, you're an innovator. But I don't feel comfortable calling myself yet that. So I'm curious, Dejha, if you can explain, when did you know you were an innovator and how did you know?
It's interesting because for me, I started understanding that I was an innovator when people weren't agreeing with me, or when people were telling me that I was on my own path and that I didn't know what I was talking about, or when I felt like often I was the first out on something and not everybody was following, but maybe they would a few months or a few other successful projects, or after somebody else co-signed or validated it who didn't look like me. So I first started thinking of myself as an ideas person. And then I got into the space of, well, I've got vision. And then I started understanding that I was an innovator after I started putting those ideas and that vision into practice. And so it was after, I would say, feeling sometimes alone or feeling misunderstood, but then pursuing nonetheless because of the support of my community and folks who did believe in me, that I started seeing that, you know, my ideas could mean something, and they could mean something in collaboration with other ideas, and that together we would be able to achieve things. And so it wasn't just I myself as the innovator, but we as innovators. And I'm a part of that too.
It's interesting, you talk about your innovation identity journey in terms of a collective one, in that it didn't exist or happen in a vacuum, didn't happen in a silo. I think a lot of times when I describe innovation, we think about, you know, business processes, optimization, you know, structural, but I think innovation is inherently a social process. It is something that thrives in trusted spaces, it thrives in collaborative spaces, and I think to some degree, it also thrives in storytelling, which I want to get to all of those points. But before we talk a little bit about those environmental conditions that I think help inclusive innovation happen, or an inclusive identity of who is an innovator occur, Corey, I want to ask you the same question. Are you an innovator?
Yeah.
And then I guess to the same question I asked Dejha, how did you come to that knowledge? Like, what was that journey like for you?
I think it really is just a manifestation of being the only, often being the only fill in the blank of the label in a particular space. And so I really had to come to understand that how I sought validation, what my standard of anything was, is okay to be different, because I was moving from a different perspective. And I really do credit my mother, who was an educator, with being able to give me that sense and to, I think, nurture this sense of having the freedom to fail before we ever thought of that as being a cool, buzzworthy kind of topic. And I think when you have that feeling of support, that ecosystem of support, I think it is that you really do find a way to be innovative, to be creative, to have that ideas and vision. I think out of necessity, out of self-preservation, I had to find that there was gonna need to be a different path that I needed to follow, because the path that little Johnny was available to little Johnny was not available to him. So that's, I think, where that spirit of innovation came from.
Riyaad, there is an element of empowerment that comes from innovating and also identifying as an innovator. And I know we're going to get into a bunch of topics today, but a lot of what I talk about in the book is we sometimes don't see how important empowerment is and what goes into create that empowerment. And it's not just doing a thing. It is often the environmental circumstances, or as my mother would say, the material conditions, right, of your life that influence that. But I guess the question to you, Sherrell, is what person inspired you to think innovatively or be an innovator?
You know, as we were sitting here, I was trying to think of all of these people that I've kind of followed externally. My core family, like I'm the only entrepreneur. I'm the only crazy person that made these very alternative decisions and choices in life. Like going away to college was like not a thing that you did. And so I was thinking about these folks that I've had to follow, like the Oprahs of the world and the Ariana Huffington. And, you know, I grew up in Seattle, so I was definitely a Microsoft kid, and, you know, the Bill Gates. And so being somewhat disconnected, but when I think about what gave me the confidence to make the choices that I made, it is Monica McAfee in her hair salon on Rainier and Seward Park in Seattle. And she had a computer science background and worked in tech for a bit and became disenchanted with the industry, being a Black woman, being in spaces that weren't necessarily the most welcoming, but also desiring a sense of freedom and an opportunity to serve her community. And so converted the mother-in-law unit of her home into a salon and has served women, church folks, these people who've been her clients for 20, 30 years. You know, that no matter what has happened in the economy or what have you, her clients were always faithful. And I remember working at the salon, sweeping hair, helping to schedule appointments, the things that were so minute that helped me even today to think about what does customer service look like? What does building, loyal clients look like? Fostering relationships. I learned that in Monica's hair salon. And when I think about the job opportunities that she gave us, and I think about having an internship at a Microsoft in high school and realizing how fortunate I was to grab something that was traditionally preserved for the city's elite schools that I was not a part of. I think about the small business entrepreneurs in communities that look like mine, who were the first ones to give us our first jobs and to teach us business, even on a small level, to teach us that you can create your own path and design that, even if it seems contrary to the easy road that could have definitely defined, you know, your life and your career. And of course, being in a tech city, it could have been easy to navigate that space. But I always look back to that experience of seeing a Black woman running her own business, deciding her own hours, and deciding also to bring in other folks who normally wouldn't have had an opportunity to have a part-time job, you know, learn the same kind of lessons that I learned. And so I loved this question because I always had this philosophy that, well, if we create internship programs in communities of color and communities that we call marginalized, but put it into the hands of small businesses to hire interns during the summer, like that could be much more influential than that 1 in 20 chance to get an internship with a startup, right? That not everyone's gonna have access to, but I might be able to hop on the bus and go to the salon or go to the distribution center and learn the skills I need for life.